Hey guys, welcome back to Final Sector, and this time we're giving a name to a bit of a segment. And this is a segment that we don't always do, but we do sometimes do it, and we will probably do it again in the future. And that is F1 Week On. That's right, it's been a week since the race, so we're doing a 1 week on review of the race.
Yeah, okay.
And now I'm not supposed to be the host of this show.
Yep.
So
yeah.
back to you, good sir.
Isn't that like every video a 1 week on?
If it's back to back, we can't do 1 week on. So it's most of the time, but not all the time.
Yeah, true. That's true. We're pretty slack, aren't we? It's
No, it's by design. It's been by design.
Oh,
this
sorry.
whole time.
Yes. No,
Everyone
you're right.
else,
Yep.
Everyone else, minutes after they're out there, you can
Yep.
still hear the drivers in the background. Us, no.
Nope.
We're waiting till
We've
the
already
whole
forgotten
simmers
what
down
happened. But yes, we are here talking about the British Grand Prix. One where, off the back of Austria, we were expecting a big Max Lando battle, and then Lewis Hamilton just goes and wins it.
Yes.
What this season is turning into is something I think it's awesome. It's unpredictable.
There's a lot of words you could use there.
Yeah. I don't even really know I guess we'll start with Hamilton, obviously. He's been on the back foot really the last year and a half, you would say, maybe even 2.5 years since 2022, compared to George in the same car especially. But since the cars, the last race or two, it started to be a little bit more competitive. He's been right up there again, and this is something I think even we've talked about in the past. It's like if he has a car that is competitive, he has that edge over his teammates. When it's not competitive, you'll see someone like a George do a little bit better, but I feel like if he's got a car that can win a race, man, he's going to do his damnedest to win that race, and he's just going to have that edge on his other teammates in the same car.
Yep.
And this, I think, is just another thing that proves it.
The prime example.
He looked faster than Russell this weekend, and even in the race. Like, Russell did out-qualify him, but in the race, he pressured him and overtook him at the start. Whether or not Russell was having those issues that caused him to retire early on, we don't know. But, he just looked the racer he once was, which I think is exciting, especially now that Mercedes seem to be back. I'm always still a bit worried saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was still not the most in terms of like straightforward, bright and sunny traditional circuit. Like there was elements of it through parts of the weekend, but it's not like it was that interchangeable as well. Like even prior to things getting really wet and soggy and whatnot, they were still doing, and arguably even in the drier parts of the races when they were the strongest on the track.
Yep.
It was actually when the race evolved into other weather, when the others kind of came back at them.
Yeah. It was interesting in particular in the race as well, where like it started out. If you've obviously watched the race if you're watching this. Started out dry, and like you say, the Mercs was super quick. Started to get a bit colder. Small amount of rain started to drizzle, and then you see the McLarens are like, we got this, and they're just like seconds faster than everyone else in those sort of mixed conditions.
Yeah.
And you go onto the inters, and when it's like proper inter, it's like a little bit even, and then it gets that crossover period again, and then the McLarens are fast again, and it's the sort of crossover period that McLaren just has that super balance. But like you say, particularly in the dry, that Mercedes was just so on point all weekend. Like I thought it was one of those, leading into practice and all that, like, it's just, Mercedes always do this, or like there's always a team that does this. They look good, and then they'll just drop back come qualifying.
You go, Alonso's back on the podium, I guess.
Exactly. But no, not this time. They were just quick all weekend, both of their drivers. So it's very, very good signs, particularly for Mercedes, that they're actually fighting for wins now. That's two weekends in a row that they've managed to do it. So the first one was obviously a bit of circumstance, but hey, it is what it is.
And it's because you hear people talking about it, a lot of discussion after is to say, how can you go so quick from one team jumping up? And of course, the inverse, having another team that we would usually be talking about in place for the second or third best team, kind of falling back.
Yeah.
And it hammers it down every time we talk about this subject that it really is so close that if you let everyone even take a small step forward and you muck it up, or if you nail it and take an even bigger step than the rest, the margins can just evaporate like that. And there is an element where it may be that it's a combination of the Mercedes in like dry cold weather, they quite like it, compared to the Red Bull, which seems to not really like cold weather. Whereas I guess when we have like a super hot, super bright, kind of sunny, super hot day, maybe the Red Bulls start to extend its wings a bit and the Mercedes will start to struggle a little bit. But irrespective, again, this weekend, it's not like it was, handed to them or that the Red Bulls crashed and McLarens were nowhere. Like, it was difficult for them. And even arguably Max and the Red Bull team kind of did everything right they could.
That was
and
one
yet
of my notes,
Hamilton still won it.
Yep.
And arguably, as much as the team had to still call strategy well and set the car up well, his driving also got it there, which is probably why, not just the fact that it's been a while since his win and it's his home race that it was so emotional, but probably because they knew they actually had a really close race. It wasn't one of those where, like, even the Russell win last time out, it was still deserved, but it was kind of like handed to him, right place, right time.
Yep.
Well, this was not handed to them at all. They had to earn it the whole weekend through.
Yeah.
And a shame that there wasn't both of them up there, of course, because I think although Hamilton was stronger, Russell still, I think, was quite strong, but it still, as a whole package, shows to, moving forward, you have more confidence to say Mercedes maybe do have something. You would be surprised if you suddenly saw them drop back to, being lapped or half the race behind the top cars.
What, like Ferrari? They didn't do that in one race.
Exactly. It's a season. It's almost like a shame that we don't have it with Max so far ahead. Like, whether there's every chance he could be caught. Again, you look at the driver who's right behind him, and it's like, well, it's not Hamilton, so he's still extending. It's just because the different drivers around him are toing in for him.
Yep.
But at least it means, again, even if he is going to win it and his lead isn't really going to be shrunk, at least the races themselves are going to be exciting. And heck, that's mainly what we're here for, is to watch cars go around and hopefully enjoy it.
Yep.
And that's what we're getting.
Yeah.
So no one can complain, I don't think.
Definitely not me. No. Like, the point you made, I think, is that I very much agree with, is that Max, like you said, they made the best strategy calls. They pitted for the right tyres on the right lap at every moment, and they still only got a P2. Like, particularly that first stint in the dry, Max was out of the, let's say, 6 cars with the one Ferrari, the 2 Mercedes, and the 2 McLarens. He was comfortably the slowest of those, which is that's not something you see very often.
No.
It was very, very odd to see. Like, even, I don't think he quite got him, but I think even Sainz, who was in 6th, was pretty quickly closing on him. He might have gotten him.
Yes.
I don't actually remember, but he was quite a bit slower, and he really needed the right strategy calls to get that P2, because if he had one slightly missed call, maybe it changes what Norris does on his strategy. You had Piastri, who was absolutely mega at the end, who, let's be honest, had a chance to win the race, and McLaren screwed him for the second weekend in a row, so that's fun. Whatever, it's fine. Enough. I feel like enough's probably been talked about that. But yeah, Max, they really had to do absolutely everything perfect, and it resulted in a P2, which normally if he did absolutely everything perfect, it'd be P1 and it'd be 45 seconds up the road. And it wasn't the case this time. So, I think you'd have to say that, again, we've got 3 teams really fighting at the top for wins, because all 3 of those teams probably could have had a win on merit. For sure. So, yeah, it's exciting. And I just wish Ferrari was there as well, but alas, here we are.
So close, yet so far in the grand scheme of things.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
And it is nice where even when you think about the result, it almost felt like it was, like you almost say, it was a Hamilton win and almost like a Lando and a McLaren loss. It's like you don't even need to kind of put Max in there for the broader story. Like, he was there and he did well and he formed part of it, but it's not even almost the highlight, It's nice to have just other drivers and teams and that you're talking about. And to your point with Piastri, it was a good point, because there was instances where he easily looked like the fastest guy on track, even during those changeable conditions. Even compared to Lando, he was just finding extra out there. And even towards the end of the race in that last stint, he was quite rapidly closing. I think he only finished like 12 seconds off the lead, and he lost a lot more than 12 seconds with that gambit that happened.
He was 5 seconds off Norris by the end, and he was a long way behind Norris.
So there's positives to take from it, both from his as a driver, both from the strength of that car. But even off the back of something we were talking about, I don't know if it was the weekend before or prior to that, but feels like McLaren are in this stage now where they're still a team, like they've gone through so much change that although they are an old, stable of F1,
they're not
almost everyone there is still relatively new to it. And as much as you can have a day where you just conquer things or you do things well or you get lucky, you've actually, you're up against two titans. You're up against Red Bull, who, of course, have been fine-tuning things with Max for a few years, so they're always going to be on top of it. And Mercedes, which still have Hamilton and most of the same guys there, which just went through a period of dominance not long ago, and they can just pull it out. And it can be easy. Like, you saw at the time when they were leaving Oscar out, and you even thought for a little bit to go, no, okay, I guess I can kind of get it. But then very quickly went, oh, God, it's a mistake. And no one else also did that, more importantly. Everyone else went, no, it's better to do the double. And they were the ones that went different. And as much as you could go, well, look, hold on. But during the first during the first stint when it got wet, I'm trying to say, they boxed Checo. They shouldn't have done that. But I think actually Checo was dead anyway, and they were saying go do some tire running for Max. So that's not one I would say was part of their bad strategy. He wasn't doing anything anyway. They were hopefully using that to help get an idea of what the dries were like in the wet. So
did seem that way. Yeah, it seemed very borderline at that point as well. And it was very much
very
a 50-50
hard call, because if they did box, it would have been over. We saw what happened with Leclerc. Nowhere. And they didn't need to do that to him. Hey, look at also, we're talking about strategy. Look at Ferrari. I mean, even if they were close or not, I mean, they just took one of their drivers out of contention completely. So.
Yeah, Leclerc had a good start as well. Like he qualified. He was out in Q2 again, but he made a good start. I think he made it up to like P7 in the first dry stint, which is pretty good. I think Sainz was only P5, P6 ish, 6. Not that far
Hulk
off.
had a bit of a fall at the start, who he got ahead of.
Yeah, that's right. So, so he had a really good start. So it was a big gamble to go on.
It wasn't like he just fell down and they said, "I'll go out there to do."
That's proper Ferrari strategy. That so. If you're gonna do it properly, and damn, did they do it properly? But oh god, what was the point I was gonna make?
Started it, yeah.
No, speaking of you talk about how Red Bull and Mercedes are they're used to fighting at the top, and maybe that's where McLaren faltered. I saw this, very similarly with the race engineers of all their lead drivers. Very big differences between, you think about, Bono with Lewis and GP with Max. Every time they say something, it's really calm. It never sounds frantic. It's always very purposeful, very direct.
And it's direct.
Yes.
It's not vague.
Yes.
They remove any element of vagueness out of it.
Yes. You don't get that. Is it Will Joseph? Is that his name?
That sounds right.
I think that's him. He was Norris's engineer. And you had the same thing with the Russia race that he lost to Lewis as well, where you would have expected them to learn from that, but his engineers it's very frantic. It's very like, here's two options, and it's very vague, and it's very do this to cover, like the whole soft to cover Hamilton, medium to cover Max, and I'm like, what does that even mean?
Not the right information for that point.
Yes.
Even sometimes you do need to go to a driver just to get their understanding. But then you've got to be like very almost direct with the reason that you're thinking on. And the information he gave almost everyone, that it's not pertinent at all, because and also because almost one answer was going to be the more likely answer if you looked at the result, because we said, do we cover Max or Lewis,
Yeah,
and he's
like,
probably like,
of
well, I think
course
I've
I'm
kind
Lewis.
of got Max, so I want to cover Lewis.
Yeah, I want to go for
But
the win.
the result of what those chose actually didn't directly correlate.
Yep.
So it's like that wasn't even the right question to ask.
That's why I was
even
so
if you were
confused.
going to borrow
Yeah.
his time.
It was very
Yeah.
odd, and it's like the whole idea
And
that
it's a snap thing. It's like he's got like a straight to figure out which tie do you want.
Yep.
And he's just got to just decide how he wants to ask that question.
Yep.
You know, and he did, and in hindsight, you go, "Wow, that was not the right way to do it." That's just instinct how it came up with it.
Yeah, like I feel like at that point you need to have, and I think McLaren have come out and basically admitted to a bunch of faults, particularly with that and the Piastri thing. But
of course, yeah.
Yeah, at that point they need to be more direct and say, hey, they've got the data, they've got all the data on the soft running, the medium running, and the hard running. That whatever they've done. All from other drivers as well, from Oscars as well. They had a fresh medium, which obviously Piastri put on and showed how fast that could be, as opposed to the used soft. They know what they have all this data, and then they're still asking Norris what he wants. I feel like they should know what should be quite a bit faster and be like, this is the tire we're putting you on. Let us know if you agree. And then if Norris says, no, I want this one, then okay, awesome. Yep. That's on him. But they need to be like, this is what we think is the fastest. We're going with this. And then he can be like, no, I don't want that. Rather than be like, do you want this or do you want this? I think it just needs, that I feel like that's what Bono and GP do really well.
Yeah.
Is they say, this is what we think is fastest. Let us know if you want to go different, rather than giving them a whole bunch of options, being like, what do I need to do? Here's one option. If you think of a different option, tell me. But it just feels frantic in the McLaren pit wall whenever there's a win on the line at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it can be that maybe that level of communication does help in other scenarios, right? I mean, often it is the radio that you hear played back a lot, or that is played when it sometimes is like this. There's obviously millions of things being said, every lap to every drive, and you don't hear them all. But it is almost these instances you point out where it was most critical. And again, where you have three different drivers in a very similar position, and you look at how two of them went with it and the other one didn't go with it. And of course, you think of almost any team that would look at this, reflect on it, and build from it. You have no reservation to say McLaren won't. But it's obvious that, Lando, understandably afterwards, was not in good spirits. I mean, we saw previously even at races, even at Spain, where he wasn't happy that he lost it. In this case, because it was almost even closer, but it was the second time that he did it. It was also the home race, of course, which is big. So of course it's going to hurt extra amount, especially when two others are doing it. And you're not. Then you look a bit like, wow, that feels even more silly because everyone else is kind of doing it right, rather than just like one other guy making a lucky call, and you're like, damn, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah.
These are the seasons. These are the races that grow
build
teams
character,
and show that exactly. And then when you go back into a title fight, I mean, it's like when you look back at 2021. I mean, what was leading up to that? Probably years of Max and Red Bull refining how they communicated their strategy, everything to get to the point where when they could challenge, they had just enough to be able to get it right enough to get over at the end of the line. We could have something similar here next year in the future, and these are the moments that they can build from to not repeat in the future, right? So that's when it's most important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's still, despite these calls, I mean, they're still picking up like P3, P4s. It's not like they're absolutely throwing it away.
It's tiny margins.
That's it. So, and at the moment, I think they're only like 6 or 7 points behind Ferrari now. So they'll probably take...
They're rapidly closing that gap.
They'll pretty quickly close P2, and they're still only about 70 points off Red Bull.
It's about 70.
Which isn't that much when you consider what both drivers in both teams are doing. So, which will lead me to my new segment that I've come up, which is called Checking In with Checo.
No, that's better than mine. That's way better.
Which we've done just about every race weekend for the last, I don't know, how many race weekends have there been this year? But now I've put a name on it.
Brilliant.
What the fuck, Checo? Come on, brother. Does he need another reset, or is he's done that too many times?
Yeah, another reset, please.
Out in Q1 after going into the gravel, obviously, tricky conditions. Max had a moment at the exact same corner, somehow managed to keep it out of the gravel, funnily enough. Don't know, it maybe has a different car. That's a bit weird. Anyway, Checo then ended up obviously starting from the pit lane. He changed his power unit. And let's be honest, the change to the inters is, I don't really know if that was his call or the team's call, like you say. But either way, it was by far the wrong decision. And then he ended up nowhere anyway, well outside the points.
Yes.
So, but if he had kept it on the track like Max did, or kept it out of the gravel like Max did, maybe he would have made it out of Q1.
Or just go through the gravel to the service road,
Yes.
like Kevin Magnussen did.
Yes.
And another driver, I can't remember.
Max did this. I think Max did the same thing. Yeah, because he kept it.
Yes.
He kept it going. And out of the wall. But yeah, somehow Checo couldn't do it. So anyway, we have seen a lot of talk. I got this little excerpt, which I don't know if it's rumors or if it's true or if it's fake, but his Cole contract clause that was revealed, it does seem like there is some merit to it, but I want to talk about it, because if there is any sort of truth to it, we won't see Checo for much longer. But the clause is that he needs to obviously improve his performance before the summer break. Red Bull can activate the clauses to remove him from his seat despite the recent contract extension. The clauses include not being more than 100 points behind Max Verstappen after the Belgian Grand Prix, which is in 2 Grand Prix time. I think we've got Hungary and then Spa. Mm-hmm. The current gap before the British Grand Prix, so I haven't even calculated afterwards, it was 119 points, so already well over. Add another 18 points on top of that, and he's far too far back to close that gap. He's also required to be within 5 places of Verstappen in the standings. But leading into the British Grand Prix, he was 5th, so he was within 5. Was. And then I think it was Piastri overtook him, and I think both Mercedes are within about 8 points of him now. So he's going to drop very quickly back to 8th. If he doesn't outscore both Mercedes, who are looking like won the last 2 races.
Good.
They both won the last 2 races.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. If there's any truth to this, we're not going to see him post Belgian Grand Prix. Like, he just won't be in the car. They won't put him back to the V carb. He'll just be gone. Like, he's just out, right? They just throw Lawson in the car, or they try Ricciardo for half a year and throw Lawson. Like,
any combination of the above.
Yeah. I don't know if
Hadjar's not doing bad.
He's
just
doing pretty good. Yeah, you could throw him in as well. I don't know if you see any truth in this. It's one of those things where it could just be completely made up, but you seem to think that there's a little bit of truth behind it, at least. So,
well, I haven't looked that much into it. I mean, to your point, it's being discussed. Even if that and those details aren't true, it doesn't change reality. That if he does get bumped down to 8th, which could very well be reality before the break,
as of next race potentially,
it's hard for Red Bull or anyone to avoid the continuous questions of saying why re-sign this contract. Yeah. Plain and simple. Because as much as you can go, even if he's just getting 2nd, or even if he had got 3rd last year, we're not talking 2nd or 3rd. We're talking 8th in a season that, although Max has competition, we still think he, at this stage, unless you disagree, a majority of people's money will still be on him winning the title.
It was a question I was going to pose after the Belgian Grand Prix in our mid-season review.
Because you can't know here. There could be something, but if it was right now,
I think you're still
with
betting
how
Max,
changey the drivers are. Yes, if it was just one driver consistently beating him, different story. But but yeah. So when that's the case, you don't even need to look at the 8th. It's just looking at so many stats you can put. We talked about the Logan Sargent qualifying stat. There's a stat from Hulkenberg, which is what I was looking at before.
Oh, yeah, I got this one,
which is basically where, in the last 2 races, that is 2, TWO, Hulk has scored more points than Perez in the last 6.
It's a good stat. It's a good stat.
And it's not like Hulk is necessarily getting podiums or anything. He's just best of the rest.
Yep. So, wait, how many 6 races ago? Is that about the time he re-signed, I wonder? Interesting. Very interesting.
Maybe instead of re-signing Checo, they should have
Resign.
re-signs.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's not.
Oh, resigns? I thought it just resign.
We both thought of a good one though. That was good. Well done.
That's funny. We're both really clever. Yeah.
Vote which one in the comments you thought was better of that. But
good stuff. Yeah, I don't know, man.
there's not much more to say.
I'm running out of superlatives to describe Perez's shit performance at this point. Yeah, it's becoming
like you kind of do feel for him because it's obviously a rut, but it's I don't know,
Yeah.
like it's Red Bull again. Why are they having this problem?
Exactly.
Don't they have like 20 juniors that are doing really well?
Red Bull are
it's not even it's rhetorical. They do
exactly. Yeah, like Red Bull are notoriously usually pretty cutthroat about this stuff, and for some reason, maybe like Max has come out and said that he likes having Checo as a teammate, probably because he doesn't threaten him at all.
Yes, there's a reason he probably likes
Exactly, like it's
because he's not there. He's away.
yeah, yeah. So we
even say for this race, it was still technically two Mercedes for most of the race and two McLarens fighting with Max.
Yep.
How things could have changed if he had a rear gunner. Maybe
Yeah.
he wouldn't have lost 1 or 2 places in the first stint because Checo was behind into block.
Yep.
And maybe then he gets a lead on a few others in the pit stops,
Yep.
and who knows how it plays out.
Yeah.
But we can't even ask those questions because it was just him.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as it doesn't matter as much as it needed to in the past, it could start to matter on and on again.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah. You don't even need to dig that deep to find reasons to go, he's a bit crap, isn't he? It's like, it's there.
Yeah.
It's so
plain.
out in the open.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. The next couple of races might prove something different, but I don't know. Evidence shows it probably won't at this point.
When you go to Spa, always where Checo wins, right?
Yes.
One of his favorites, I guess.
All those historic Checo Perez
All those
wins
trophies.
at Spa. Yeah. And the Hungaroring where Mercedes is definitely not going to be quick like they were last year, and they're even quicker this year. And
that's true, actually.
Yeah, so,
true.
yeah, we'll get into that. That's future video, but yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's checking in with Checo. Hope you enjoyed this segment. It'll be back next week.
That's
I'm sure of
brilliant.
it. So, yeah, we've already sort of talked about Ferrari. I'm kind of hoping that they just find something, but
they need to figure out what they're doing. It sounds like that they are doing a revised upgrade. So they put this upgrade on. It obviously didn't work. They kind of half run it during this weekend. It was interesting listening to, it must have been Gary Anderson on the race.
Yeah.
They did a bit of a debrief on Ferrari. And they were saying how last year they got stuck in this rut. And I think they used a full practice day. Gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head when it was. But to basically run it almost as a testing day, where rather than prepping for the weekend, doing long runs, doing short runs, they put like a kit on the car in the morning. They ran it with full aero and data, and they put a kit on the afternoon. They ran it. And then the races after that, the upgrades they applied actually did quite a lot, where then they started to, get back up, and they snapped a few of those poles and such was after that period.
it must have been Japan was when, like,
That
whatever
sounds about
the race before
right.
Japan was probably
It was
where
around that area.
Yeah,
It was
'cause
that
then-
area of the year.
because Japan, I remember, is when Leclerc started to come good again. Like, whatever
Yes.
upgrades meant he was
Yes.
way up there and, getting pole positions. And then Brazil obviously got that pole position. Yeah.
Correct.
So
it seems like here at Silverstone on the Friday they did a similar thing, not to the same degree, but a similar concept.
Gotcha.
Where they just sorted out the bits. That's why the drivers were running different things. And now they're basically planning to do the upgrade again, but have it revised to how I guess it hopefully will have the effect that they think. So almost it's kind of held them back a little bit beyond everyone else. But there's no reason that with a good timed upgrade, I mean, heck, we look at McLaren, who at the start of the year said, hey, we're behind on a few things. We know we are. Wait till we get the full stuff running. And now we look where they are. And no one else points out now to go, well, actually, they should have been here since race 1. I mean, you can if you want, but the reality is they knew they were behind.
Yeah.
Ferrari can get it down and get it sorted. There's room for them to bring it up.
Yeah.
But if they still bring this revised package and they're still struggling, well, then you just go, great, that's written it off for the year. Just focus on 2025, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep. Or they'll do.
it's painful for now.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, I
go
was
on,
going to
what are
say,
you
this
gonna
is just what they did exactly like you say last year, or like every year it feels like they'll start strong, kind of awful mid-year and then come
Something
strong at
goes
the end of the
wrong.
year. Yeah. They'll just feel like do the same again. But if what you're saying is right, they're learning a little bit more from their mistakes from last year and doing this stuff earlier in the year, like, testing a lot of this stuff earlier. So maybe they'll get back on the horse. The horse. I was going to say that's clever.
that works.
That's clever.
Nice.
Get back on the horse a bit quicker than they did last year, and particularly with how close it is, anything can happen if you have 4 teams in there. All 7 of the 8 drivers are all capable of pulling out something miraculous, and then the 8th is who knows. Gotta love Checo. I mean, talking about the rest of the points, we could talk about the lower points, but I'm not talking about anyone else before we talk about Hulkenberg getting a P6. Mate, this guy, I was thinking about it. This guy right here. I was thinking about it. He's arguably the best driver on the grid at the moment. Like,
it's not doing too shabby.
I could see an argument for him being the best driver on the grid. He is in unbelievable form at the moment. Just rack up another P6 in a Haas that was like, it's not bad, but I wouldn't have thought it'd be P6.
Best of the rest, comfortably.
And if we saw, Magnussen, what he's able to do in the Haas, which when he was with Mick and he came in and absolutely blistered, we're like, oh, Magnussen still got it. He's super quick. What the Haas has way more. Like, if you looked at just Magnussen's progress, you'd say the Haas is, it's doing okay. It's probably around the V carbs, maybe a little bit lower than that at times. But Hulkenberg's showing that, actually, it's on its day, it's faster than the Astons. And that day seems to be pretty regular at the moment, it seems.
Every day.
Yeah. So he's doing unbelievably. And I really hope that his move to Sauber that becomes Audi does prove fruitful and Audi can actually give him a good car. Because, man, he is in such good form at the moment. I'd hate to see it wasted.
I reckon it felt like, from Audi's perspective, a bit of a risk to put it on. Even when you saw it, you went, no, that makes sense, but you still could have gone for a number of other drivers.
Especially with his age as well.
Yeah, but it looks pretty good now. Yeah. I mean, on the age, I actually had another stat that, even from Hamilton's perspective, that this actually is the oldest F1 winner since Nigel Mansell in 1994 at the Australian Grand Prix.
Dang.
And it goes to show that, I mean, we've seen it with Alonso, right? I mean, it probably would have been similar for, I guess he would have, I don't know, he wouldn't have taken the record, but he would have taken, I guess, one of the oldest since records if he had won last year.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, a driver, you look at his story, that he did have, he went to Renault, Ricciardo came in, kind of beat him up a bit, took a 1 or 2 year sabbatical, came back now and then for COVID, did decent. Weird to hear him coming back. You thought it was going to be another Magnussen where it's all right. And yet now in his, second year here, he did enough to both secure a 2-year, contract with the big manufacturer with some pretty high, sights they've got their sights set on. And he's killing it as is. And both credit to him, to the team, I guess, the direction. I mean, there was all this chaos at the start of the year. There was fear going, God, they're sacking their team principal at the start of the year. What does this mean? And we all went, well, realistically, it sounds like they're going to take another year to build up. And yet, half a year later, here we are. And they're just getting things right. And they're getting strategy right. And their driver, even at the start of the race, he mucked up his start. He fell back to 9th.
Yeah.
And we thought, unlucky, but hopefully he can get a point out of it. And then you're like, wait, he's back in 6th. Wait, how did he get back there?
Yeah. Just in the background, making all the right. It was a tricky,
the right pits,
a tricky call, a tricky race for strategy calls, and to get from P9 to P6 in a Haas that, while its race pace isn't amazing, it's good enough, but you still have to make all the right calls, and they absolutely did. Apparently, I didn't actually see when they.
It was hard because there was so much at the front.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
And even with the Astons, which are quite strong in that weather as well, they seem to really like that colder weather.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of seemed like they were going to be the best of the rest, but then he managed to slip by.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah. Fair play to Hulkenberg, and hopefully he keeps doing what he's doing because it's just good to watch.
Yeah.
And then, as always seems to be the case, Tsunoda and Albon cleaning up the rest of the points. There you go. Hulkenberg, Albon, Tsunoda seem to be the best of the rest, and there they are. Always the ones in the points. There's no one else. Never anyone else there. Very, very occasionally Ricardo, 1 in every 8 races, he'll be there. And yeah, it is so close in that midfield, but when it's the same drivers getting into the points, you start to see a trend. That is the trend. And you sort of see that, these drivers are just that level above, and this is the reason they keep getting into the points. It's because they're just the better drivers. And yeah, Hulkenberg, Albon, Tsunoda are the 3 you look at and you're like, yeah, that's about right. They should be in the points.
Yep.
So yeah, fair play. Maybe other drivers will do something, but I don't know. It's
still a long year. It's still a long year to go. We're
only halfway through.
Very strong before, but we've also seen them fall off by this stage normally. So the fact that they're up there and they're performing so consistently, we'll have to see. It's again. Probably look back to the start of the year. It's hard to predict these things, and it is good that is not necessarily so predictable. It's always interesting. It feels like we're going to have this instance again where we get to the last year of regulations and it turns out to be like the most interesting year.
Yeah.
And we all go, well, can we push it back more? Because let's just do more of this, please.
Yeah. Well, at least it's not like, 2021, it's like we had the one interesting year and it's like, this is the only year we've got. We've got this year and we've still got next year as well before the new regulations come in. So this is...
And that year was a bit different because because of COVID, there was originally supposed to be 21 when they were going to change everything, and they did all
18, I think.
Like they dropped the downforce and they did a few things like that to do interim steps. But in this case, it feels like we don't even really need it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely.
It was interesting. Just a few other points. I think again when I was listening to one of the podcasts out there, how they were saying that this could even be. It's sometimes easy to forget that over the past few years, because both Red Bull have been winning and because of their penalty, that they do have quite a lot less wind tunnel and such than other teams.
Yep.
And it's both impressive they're able to keep a lead, but it might be now that they're not necessarily able to still accelerate so hard because the other teams now are more maximizing their things. So even though when you look at the start of last year, McLaren and Ferrari, Mercedes and such still had a fair bit to do, especially McLaren. But now that they're more on top of these regs and, really maximizing that.
It's just fine-tuning.
Time they can use. And because it's so much more time than Red Bull have, it could also explain why Red Bull aren't necessarily stagnating, but the restrictions, that back when they talked about the rules, you thought, wow, they're going to have 60% compared to everyone else's. They're going to flunder. And you almost forget that was the case because they are doing so well, and more a testament to how well they've been doing. But this could be part of it as well. It actually is reeling them back a little bit because of the balance of all that, which it should.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but we'll have to see. It could come next 2 races and it's dominant again. And we just go, well, but
yeah, yeah, they
better
are.
to have it unknown than to know exactly and to go, I'm just going to watch this one Wednesday or something. I'm not going to bother. Right?
True. Yeah. The next 2 races, but won't go too much into it because obviously we do our previews. But the next 2 races, Hungary, which is the next one, we saw Hamilton put it on pole last year when they looked pretty awful all year. Like they were and he still managed to put it on pole. So that's a track that Mercedes tend to like, and with their resurgence, you could see them be quite quick. At Spa, we saw the McLarens were right up there as well. Both Oscar and Lando were very much on the pace in I think the sprint and the race at different stages. I think they got a little bit. They had the high downforce package because it was like a wet, like rainy, and then it was a dry race.
That's right. Yes.
But they were super super quick, and definitely right on Max's tail at that point as well. So I don't. As much as you could see Max and Red Bull sort of run away with it in the next 2 races, it is Max and Red Bull. Exactly. But there's enough even in the last year to say, well, actually, these teams that are, the closest that have been to Max and Red Bull all year, they are tracks that they've excelled at in recent memory. So I think we can still look at it and be like, it could still be very close leading up to the summer break. And I think that's really all we want is still some close races leading up to the summer break. And then we can have all these questions of, can anyone overtake? Yeah, exactly. Rather than just like writing it off at the end of the next two races. Like, I don't think anyone really wants to do that.
Even if the last two races, Max and Red Bull had pretty comfortably won, I think we'd still be heading into these two weekends with still a little optimism.
Sure.
The fact is they didn't in either of them, which leads us even more to these two races, which we expected to have that conversation to really have it. I think especially next weekend should be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. This feels like a good one coming up.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, for sure. Those were really all the notes I had. I guess the only other thing to our favourite commenter, B. Sylvester, I thought your account got deleted. All your comments disappeared for a while, but I saw they're back. He just mentioned that, the F3 feature race was insane, which it was. Definitely watch that, even if you don't really watch F3. It's a wild ride. Imagine the wet to dry in the Formula 1 race, but with 30 cars and wet to dry to wet to dry to wet to dry, with teams that don't normally do pit stops. It was chaos. It was really fun to watch. It was just a good weekend all round. I think the British Grand Prix, it always seems to be. But if that's all you had, we can wrap it up. Yeah, awesome. That's it from us. Let us know your thoughts if you're excited going forward into the next two races like we are. But other than that, we'll see you very, very soon for the Hungarian Grand Prix preview. Take care, everyone.